You ever stop and wonder why some societies just explode with wealth and power, only to completely fall apart? I mean, from ancient empires to these medieval superpowers, history is just littered with stories of these spectacular rises and then, boom, these devastating falls. So we're going to try and unravel that puzzle.
So yeah, the big question is, why? Why do they fall? Is it just bad luck? Foreign invaders knocking at the gate? Or is there something deeper going on? Well, a really powerful theory suggests the answer has nothing to do with armies or bad luck. It's all about the rules a society decides to live by. It's about its institutions.
And really, it all boils down to this fundamental conflict. On one side, you've got what are called inclusive institutions. Think of these as open systems, right? They create opportunities for tons of people. They're all about innovation, moving up in the world, sharing power. But on the other side, you've got extractive institutions. These are designed by a tiny elite, basically to suck all the wealth and power to the top, choking off opportunity for literally everyone else. And this battle, this tug of war between the two, you could say it's the real engine of history.
All right, first up, Venice. We're calling this the Golden Cage, a story of open doors and then slammed shut.
Okay, to really get a sense of just how big a deal Venice was, get this. By 1330, its population hit 110,000. Now that might not sound huge today, but back then, that was as big as Paris and a mind-blowing 3 times the size of London. This wasn't just some city, it was a global economic powerhouse. So, how in the world did they pull that off?
Well, their secret sauce was this incredible financial invention called the commanda. The easiest way to think about it is like an early version of a startup, but just for a single trading voyage. And this simple contract, this little partnership, was the key that unlocked human potential on a scale nobody had ever seen before.
So, here's how it worked. It was actually pretty simple. You had one partner, the sedentary one, who was usually wealthy and just put up the cash. Then you had a younger, super ambitious, but maybe not so rich traveling partner, who actually ran the whole voyage. And here's the genius part. The profit split. The entrepreneur out on the ship, the one taking all the real risk, could keep up to half the profits. I mean, talk about an engine for social mobility.
And all this new cash flying around? It did a lot more than just build fancy palaces. This economic explosion created a whole new class of super wealthy merchants. And these newcomers, who weren't from the old, stuffy noble families, started to want a say in how things were run. They wanted political power. And you can probably guess how the old guard, the established elite, felt about that. They got very, very nervous.
And that fear is what led to this. La Cerrada. It literally means the closure. And as you can see, this wasn't some overnight coup. No, this was a slow, deliberate strangling of the very system that made them great. Step by step, over about 30 years, the elite just sealed off the political system. Membership in the Great Council, the ruling body, went from being an opportunity to a birthright. They pulled up the ladder right behind them.
And once they had total political control locked down, what do you think they did next? They went after the economy. The Great Council outlawed the commenda contracts, the very thing that had made Venice rich in the first place. Why? Because those contracts created competition. They empowered their rivals. So instead, the state took over trade. And just like that, Venice's engine of prosperity just sputtered out. The city basically became what it is today, a beautiful living museum, a relic of the dynamism it chose to kill.
Okay, next up, the Roman parallel from republic to ruin. And you're going to see some striking similarities here.
I mean, it is just staggering to think about the sheer scale of the Roman economy back in the Republic. And the way we know this is so cool. We have evidence from some really surprising places. For one, archaeologists have cataloged shipwrecks, and they found that the number of wrecks peaked right around the 1st century AD. That's a direct sign of just massive amounts of trade. But even crazier, ice cores drilled in Greenland show that lead pollution from Roman silver mining peaked at the exact same time, a level of pollution the world wouldn't see again for more than 1,000 years. Incredible.
But there was a fatal flaw in the system. Rome's institutions, you see, were only kinda inclusive. The real power was concentrated in the Senate, and as Rome got bigger and bigger, a tiny handful of super-rich senatorial families basically gobbled up all the new wealth, mostly in the form of massive estates. And this created absolutely staggering levels of inequality.
So this growing crisis brings a man named Tiberius Gracchus onto the scene. He gets elected as a tribune of the people, and he proposes what sounds like a pretty simple, powerful idea: land reform.
He just wanted to redistribute public lands that the super-rich senators had hoarded and give it to the thousands of Roman citizens who had nothing.
Now, to the elite, this wasn't just some policy proposal. This was an earthquake. They saw it as a threat to the very foundation of their power and their wealth, and they completely panicked. They were thinking, this guy is threatening everything.
And so they did the unthinkable. A mob of senators, led by Gracchus's own cousin, by the way, literally clubbed him and hundreds of his supporters to death, in broad daylight, right there on the Capitoline Hill. This was the turning point. This was the moment the Roman elite chose violence and extraction over reform and inclusion. And it was, for all intents and purposes, the beginning of the end for the Republic.
All right, Section 3, when growth stops, or the fear of new ideas.
This story is it's chilling. So picture this. An inventor comes to the Emperor Tiberius, and he proudly presents his new invention, unbreakable glass. I mean, think about that. A world-changing technology. And what does Tiberius do? He has the guy executed. The reason? He was terrified that this amazing new material would make gold and silver worthless, shattering the entire economic order that kept him on top.
And it wasn't a one-off. Here's another one. An engineer shows Emperor Vespasian a new device that could move these massive columns way more cheaply. Vespasian praises the invention and then says, no thanks. His justification? How will I feed the populace? He needed the make-work jobs to keep the masses in Rome from rioting. For him, political control was way more important than economic progress.
So, what happens when this long decline finally hits bottom? That brings us to Section 4, Echoes of the Fall, or what happens when the lights go out.
This table, looking at a Roman fort in Britain called Vindolanda, shows just how fast a complex society can completely unravel. I mean, just look at the before column, around 400 AD. You've got money, you've got cities, people can read and write. Now look at the after column, just a century later. Poof, it's all gone, vanished.
The economy went back to just bartering. The cities were abandoned. The actual skill of writing just disappeared from the region. The lights of civilization just went out. And there's this one grim, haunting line from the source material that sums it all up. After the Romans left, nobody wrote from Vindolanda anymore.
Okay, so for our final section, why history isn't destiny, let's talk about small differences and big divergences.
There's a term for moments like the ones we've been talking about, critical junctures. You can think of them as these massive shocks to the system, something like the Black Death or the collapse of an empire. These events shake everything up, and they create these giant forks in the road of history. And at those forks, even small differences in a society's institutions can send them down wildly different paths.
Look, the stories of Venice and Rome, they're not just some dusty old history. They're this incredibly powerful reminder that progress isn't inevitable. It's not guaranteed. It's always a choice. And that, of course, forces us to ask a pretty uncomfortable question. If progress isn't guaranteed, what choices are we making today?